Danilo Malafaia is a Taekwondo coach, and he's also the co-founder of the Martial Arts Coalition for Sustainable Development. He serves as the administrative director of the Jadir Taekwondo Association in Brazil, which has supported over 8,000 youth through sports and education. His work leverages martial arts to prevent violence, empower vulnerable communities, and advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Beyond the dojo and how martial arts contribute to safer and resilient communities is the title of the presentation Danilo has prepared for us today. So please, Danilo, go ahead, take the floor, is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good afternoon for those of you who are in Latin America or the US. I am based in Brazil, so it's good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation, Gentiana and Anat. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, my name is Danilo Malafaia. I am a third Dan black belt in Taekwondo. I've been coaching for approximately 15 years in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. As Gentiana said, I am not involved with empowerment self-defense, so I'm learning quite a lot from you today. Most of my experience comes through the Jadir Taekwondo Association, which is a grassroots nonprofit organization based in Rio that has been assisting children and young people from underserved communities for over 2 decades. I have also worked with high-performance sports. I was an athlete myself. I've worked with the Brazilian national Taekwondo team for many years as performance analyst, and this experience made me realize something, that there is a considerable number of successful high-performance athletes in martial arts that actually come from social programs. I was able to see some of these programs up close and how they were giving young people from complex backgrounds a positive opportunity in life away from violence and crime. My mentor, Grandmaster Jadir, who's also born and raised in the suburbs of Rio, he had the opportunity to practice martial arts as a child thanks to a social program, which eventually led him to become head coach of the Brazilian national team for many years. As a way to give back to the community, he started his own social program in the suburbs, and he founded the Jadir Taekwondo Association, which I am really proud to have been part of as a student and now as coach and manager. Both me and Jadir, we are very passionate about martial arts social programs because our lives were positively impacted thanks to them. And this is the type of story that we see repeatedly over and over, not only in Brazil, but in communities all over the world, for programs for children and young people from underserved communities, programs for refugees, for women, for young girls. And a few years ago, that observation led us to create a platform to connect all of those programs together so we could learn from each other and strengthen our work collectively. And thus we founded the Martial Arts Coalition for Sustainable Development, or MCS for short. Today, MCS connects more than 120 organizations from different countries that are using martial arts or combat sports or self-defense practices to address social challenges connected to the Sustainable Development Goals or the UN Agenda, the 2030 Agenda. What surprised me after speaking with so many organizations from many different contexts and countries all over the world was how often they were facing similar issues. So violence, gender inequality, youth vulnerability, social exclusion. And despite working in different cultures, many were discovering similar solutions. And that is what I would like to explore a little bit today. Now, when people think about violence prevention, martial arts may not be the first thing that comes to mind. Some people may even view martial arts as contradictory to violence prevention. But thinking about this for a moment, most violence prevention specialists talk about protective factors. So supportive relationships, confidence, sense of belonging, safe environments. Now we think about a well-run martial arts organization, and very often those same protective factors are present. So a student enters a dojo, they meet mentors, they become part of a community, they learn discipline and self-control, they develop confidence, and eventually they might become leaders and discover leadership opportunities. What many organizations around the world have realized is that these elements can be intentionally used to address deeper social issues. Now, I want to make an important distinction that the organizations that I'm discussing today, they are not abandoning martial arts. They're not abandoning combat sports. They still teach the technical skills. They still value self-defense, but they recognize that the social environment that is created around martial arts can be equally important, and that the relationships that are built through those activities can last years. Many organizations begin by teaching martial arts or combat sports or self-defense practices. Eventually, they realize that they are actually creating communities, and communities can influence how people experience safety, opportunity, and empowerment. And this realization is not unique to Brazil. Within the coalition, we see organizations working with refugees, women affected by violence, marginalized youth, indigenous communities, and many other groups. And the methods, of course, they vary, contexts, they vary, but we see common patterns. And today I want to focus on 4 examples that may be particularly relevant for the empowerment self-defense community. And the first example comes from India. Red Brigade Trust, one of our members, they are based in Lucknow in India. The organization started in a context where violence against women and young girls is a serious issue, and they began as small community workshops, which gradually evolved into a structured movement which is led by young women. And a key moment in the development of this initiative came from the realization that many participants were already living the reality that the program was trying to address. So instead of treating them only as participants, the work started to turn them into part of the response itself. So over time, young women who had experienced violence, they became trainers, they became organizers and managers, public voices within the initiative. Red Brigade is widely recognized for their self-defense training. On the surface, it might sound like it's mainly about physical techniques, but in practice, the training is built around much more than that. It includes awareness of surroundings, decision-making under pressure, communication skills, and building confidence in public spaces. The physical part is only just one part of the bigger process. And alongside that, the work extends into schools, community spaces, and awareness activities. There's also a strong focus on dialogue around rights, around safety, and access to support systems. So the approach is not isolated. It connects different levels of prevention and response. And over time, this grew from a small local effort into something that has reached thousands of girls and young women. The growth was not driven by scale just for the sake of scaling it. It came from repeated engagement in communities and from building trust step by step. And from broader lens, this connects naturally with global development priorities, especially around gender equality, education, safer communities. And to me, what stands out is that these themes are translated into practical action at the local level. There are a few clear takeaways from this case, which is, well, first, lived experience can become leadership. When people who understand the challenge from the inside, they are part of developing the response, the work becomes more grounded and more relevant. Second, self-defense can function as a wider development tool. In this case, it is not only about physical protection, it becomes a way to build confidence, awareness, and personal agency that carries into daily life. Third, stronger impact comes when different types of activities are connected. So just the training aspect is not treated as much. It's important as education, as community engagement, awareness. So it creates a more complete approach. And fourth, growth can come through consistency rather than scale strategies. So the initiative expanded because it kept showing up in communities, building trust over time, and staying close to what the communities, what they really need. And what this case shows in the end is how a local initiative can grow into a bigger movement when it stays rooted in the reality of the community. And perhaps most importantly, it gives space for participants to become leaders in their own processes. The second example also comes from India, specifically from the state of Assam, where Project Nari Shakti was developed by William Hatt Foundation. Like many initiatives in the field of self-defense and empowerment, the starting point is a recognition of what is needed from the community. So women and girls face safety risks in public and private spaces, and self-defense training is often seen as an important response to that reality. But what is interesting in this case is how the project builds on that foundation, but it does not stop there. So alongside self-defense training for the young girls, the program expands the focus of it to the surrounding environment. So the idea is that individual skills are important, they are essential, but they exist within a wider social context that also needs to be addressed. So the project combines empowerment sessions with community awareness activities. These are not treated as separate things, they reinforce each other. And a particularly important element is the engagement with men and boys. I think this is where the approach becomes more structural. Instead of placing responsibility only on potential victims, the program works with the broader community to address norms, behavior, attitudes that contribute to violence in the first place. So this shifts from framing of prevention, it moves from an individual responsibility model towards a shared responsibility model. So in practice, it means that workshops and dialogues that includes schools, community groups, and mixed audience. It also creates space for reflection on everyday behaviors and power dynamics, self-defense training. It remains a core component, but it's part of an ecosystem of change. So the participants, they are not only trained to respond to risk situations, they're also part of a process that looks at how those risks are produced in the first place. So over time, this creates a more comprehensive understanding of safety, connects personal empowerment with community accountability and immediate response skills with longer-term prevention. And looking at a broader perspective, Nadi Shakti aligns with global goals around gender equality and violence prevention, but I would say most distinctive contribution is the way that it integrates these goals into both individual and collective action. One key lesson from this case is that self-defense becomes more effective when it's connected in a wider prevention strategy. So the personal skills, they matter, but their impact increases when the surrounding environment is also part of the intervention. A second lesson is the importance of including men and boys in violence prevention work when they are engaged as participants in the process rather than only as external factors. The potential for cultural change becomes much stronger. A third insight is that prevention needs to operate on multiple levels at the same time. So individual empowerment, community awareness, social norm change are not separate goals. They reinforce each other. And a final lesson is that sustainable impact depends on shifting responsibility from isolated individuals to a shared community responsibility, because if safety becomes a problem of everyone, then the conditions that allow violence to persist, they begin to change. Now, the third example comes from Guatemala, and it offers a slightly different perspective on how combat sports can contribute to social change. The organization is called AXC, which stands for Acción para el Cambio Social, or Action for Social Change. It was founded in 2015 by former boxer Nancy Perez in the department of San Marcos, which is near the border with Mexico. And they have spent more than a decade working with children and young people in vulnerable communities. They use sport, education, and community development as tools that are interconnected for social transformation. Now, boxing may seem different from the usual self-defense approaches at first glance, but looking more closely, many of the outcomes are quite similar. So AXC uses boxing as an entry point. So young people often join because they are interested in the sport itself. They want to learn how to punch, how to box, or improve their fitness. But their methodology combines boxing with educational opportunities, leadership development, gender equality initiatives, community engagement. For me, one thing that stands out is that boxing in this organization, it becomes a language, because people may come because they want to learn boxing, but they stay because they find community, they find support, they find opportunities, and most importantly, they discover that someone believes in their potential. And many of us have probably seen this in our own organizations. So the sport or self-defense practice or martial art, it attracts participants, but then the relationships that we build and they build over time is what keeps them engaged, and it's what may eventually transform their lives. Now, AXC demonstrates something that many organizations working with martial arts and combat sports, particularly with sports for development, they have learned over the years, is that real impact comes from everything that happens around the sport. So the coaching relationships, the mentoring, the supportive environment, the opportunities to lead, and the sense of community frequently become just as important as the technical skills being taught. And in terms of lesson learned, first, sport can be an entry point for wider development. So young people may initially join because they are interested in boxing, but the sport creates opportunities to engage them in education, in leadership development, in personal growth. So sport becomes the starting point for something bigger. And second, relationships are often the true catalyst for change. While sport attracts participants, long-term impact frequently comes from the trust, from the mentorship, and from the sense of belonging that develop within the organization. And supportive relationships can help young people see new possibilities for themselves and for their futures. And third, combat sports can create spaces for meaningful dialogue. So programs like this demonstrate that boxing, for instance, or any other combat sport or martial art, they can be used to facilitate conversations around gender equality, violence prevention, leadership, and community. Sport can provide a good environment for these discussions to happen. And lastly, the strongest sport for development programs, they connect sport to opportunity. So the training aspect becomes even more powerful when it's linked to education, to life skills, to leadership pathways, community engagement. So this connected approach helps that the benefits extend well beyond the training session itself. The final example that I want to share is one that is particularly close to me because it comes from my own experience in Rio de Janeiro. So Fight for Women was launched by Jadir Taekwondo Association in 2019 in response to a demand that came directly from the community that we have been assisting for over 2 decades. So our association has been delivering free martial art classes for children and young people from underserved communities for over 2 decades, tackling several issues at the same time, but particularly social exclusion, education, and climate action. As part of it, we have always offered a safe space for young girls to engage in our activities. However, women started to approach us. They were the mothers of the children enrolled in our programs. Some of them had experienced different forms of abuse. Others were concerned about their personal safety in a context of increasing violence against women. So they came to us and they said they wanted something practical to protect themselves, but they were also looking for something more. They were looking for confidence, for support, the network of support, and obviously a safe space where they could learn without judgment. So that demand led to the creation of Fight for Women. And from the beginning, our goal was not simply to teach a few self-defense techniques. We wanted to develop a program that was structured, that would help women strengthen their ability to recognize risks, respond to threatening situations, and build greater confidence in their daily lives. And as the program developed, we realized that many participants were dealing with challenges that extended beyond physical safety. Violence can take many forms. It can be physical, can be also psychological, emotional, economic. And because of this, we understood that a self-defense program alone would not be enough to address the realities that many women from our community were facing. And this is why we adopted a multidisciplinary approach. So alongside self-defense training, we began working with professionals from different fields, including health and psychology, creating opportunities for participants to access support, information, and guidance from specialists. And this helped transform the program into a network of support that went beyond just the training aspect. Another aspect that I believe is important is accessibility. The program has always been offered free of charge. Most participants, they come from underserved communities in Rio, and removing this financial barrier has been essential to guarantee that the women who need the program the most could participate. And since 2019, which is when the program was launched, we have supported more than 300 women. Of course, the numbers only tell part of the story. The individual journeys, they are what's most important. So women who initially arrived feeling, uncertain, and they gradually became more confident. Women who had never participated in sport or martial arts, they discovered new capabilities. Women who felt isolated, they found a community that supported them. After our very first class back in 2019, we had about 120 women who had signed up for the inaugural class, and 70 were present. And our psychologist, Candida, and she's right here, she had this idea of creating a WhatsApp group for the participants to express themselves, and especially their opinions about the program, because we wanted them to also help us develop the program, hearing their opinions and hearing their ideas. So I was not directly involved in coaching, but more active on the project managing aspect, marketing and outreach. And I remember we had so many positive responses from participants. Some of them were going through depression, many had suffered abuse, and after the very first class, they said things like, I'm able to go outside again. I was struggling to even come outside of my house for the class. It's been like that for months, and now I feel like a completely different person. I feel much more powerful and capable. So of course, it wasn't just about, learning a few techniques that you learn in a 1-hour class. So for me, the project reinforces that self-defense is about responding to violence, but also about creating conditions where people can feel safer, stronger, and more capable of making decisions about their own lives. And when self-defense is combined with, support systems, education, and community, I believe the impact can go far beyond the training space, the dojo. Our own lessons from developing this program are that first, the needs of the community should shape the program design. So Fight for Women was developed after listening to women in the community and responding to challenges that they identified as priorities. Now we had a long relationship with the women because most of them were actually the mothers of the children that had been with us for almost a decade in some cases. And second, self-defense works best within a support ecosystem. So the physical techniques, they become more effective when they're combined with psychological support and access to guidance. And third, accessibility is essential for inclusion, especially if we are serving a low-income community. So offering the program free of charge helps keep the women from underserved communities participating, regardless of their economic circumstances. And particularly in Brazil, this is really, really tough. And lastly, safe spaces can be transformative. Beyond learning skills, participants gain confidence, they build supportive relationships, they become part of a community that strengthens their sense of agency and belonging. Looking at these 4 examples, one thing becomes very clear. It's that there are many different approaches to self-defense and violence prevention. So Red Brigade focuses on survivor leadership. Then we have Nari Shakti, which places a strong emphasis on community awareness and also engaging and educating young men. And AXC uses boxing as the entry point to work on several other social issues affecting young girls. And then Fight for Women combines self-defense training with psychological and health support. If we only looked at the activities, we could say the programs are essentially different, but looking a bit deeper, they have many things in common. And first, all of them go beyond the aspect of self-defense. So the physical component, it's important, but none of these organizations, they stop at the self-defense. They all connect the training aspect to something deeper, whether that's confidence, community participation, or support services. And second, all 4 programs are responding to specific local realities. So the challenges faced by women and young girls in India, they are different from those faced by women in Rio, which are different from the context in Guatemala. And because of that, the programs look different. And I believe that's probably how it should be. One of the mistakes we make sometimes in the social sector is looking for a model that can simply be copied and pasted somewhere else. And these examples suggest something different. The strongest programs, they are often the ones that start by understanding the needs of a particular community and then building a response around those needs. Another thing I noticed is that all 4 organizations invest heavily in relationships, whether it's through self-defense or group discussions or mentoring. They are creating environments where the people, the participants can feel connected and feel supported. And I think that's really what matters the most, because violence prevention and empowerment are rarely achieved through a single workshop, a single training session. So they usually happen through longer processes where trust is built over time. So while the methods vary, there are some shared principles running through all four examples. So listening to community needs, creating supportive environments, building confidence and agency, and connecting individual development with a bigger social change. And for me, those common elements are probably more important than specific activities themselves. Now, looking across these examples, I think one important conclusion is that martial arts organizations or organizations that use martial arts for self-defense practices, they have assets that go beyond technical instruction. We often focus on what happens during the training sessions, but many organizations are also creating safe spaces for their communities, building relationships, developing local leaders, responding to their local challenges. Well, all four of them, they work as NGOs, so it only makes sense. And the exact activities, they will certainly differ from one organization to another, but the potential is much broader than sports participation alone. So in many communities, martial arts organizations are already acting as informal education providers, community hubs, and platforms for social engagement. One thing that has become clearer and clearer to me and to everyone here in Brazil, and particularly through the Martial Arts Coalition, is that many organizations are doing remarkable work, often independently, isolated, sometimes without even realizing that similar initiatives are happening elsewhere in the world. So through the coalition, we have members working on so many different issues. So gender equality, education, youth leadership, environmental sustainability. The approaches, they are quite different from one another. The challenges are obviously different, but there is a commitment that is common to all of us, which is using martial arts as a platform for positive social impact. I believe that it's really important that we create even more spaces where organizations can learn from one another and exchange ideas and collaborate around common challenges. And before I conclude, there's a recent example that I think connects really well with this. So we understand that climate issues are affecting local communities everywhere in the world, and particularly low-income communities. So think about the constant floods, the unprecedented heat waves that we are having, the landslides, which are very common in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, where our beneficiaries live. So we took the opportunity during World Environment Day on June 5th to do something as a collective act through the coalition. So we invited martial arts organizations around the world to act for climate and for the environment. The campaign is called One Tree, One Movement, and the activities were quite simple. So the initial idea was for everyone to plant at least a tree, but we understand the different realities, and some people are not even in places where they can plant trees. So the organizations, some of them did plant trees, but others, they organized community cleanups for environmental educational activities and engaged students and communities around sustainability, environment protection, and climate action. This is the first ever environment campaign involving martial arts organizations globally. And what's interesting is that the vast majority of our member organizations, they do not work with environmental education or climate action or nature protection, and none of it. And through the campaign, they started to understand why we should act collectively and understand that climate change is affecting all of us, especially in underserved communities. And what interested me the most was seeing that organizations that are so different from each other, not only in terms of their size, because we had small clubs, NGOs, and big national federations involved, but especially considering their own cultural contexts. So with all those differences, they stood up to contribute to a single objective in their own ways. So they were able to adapt the challenge to their own realities. And in many ways, this reflects the theme of this presentation, because martial arts organizations do not all contribute in the same way. They respond to different challenges and they work in different contexts, but when these local efforts are connected, they can contribute to something that is much larger than any single organization could achieve on their own. And perhaps most importantly, they start to understand that they are not alone and that there is a community that they can rely on and learn from and pursue similar objectives. The question is not whether martial arts can contribute to safer and more resilient communities. The examples that you saw today, they show that they already do. The opportunity moving forward is understanding how we can strengthen those contributions, learn from one another, and work together more effectively. And that's our mission with the Martial Arts Coalition. And as I learn more about the world of empowerment self-defense and the work of ESDEurope, you seem to be doing amazing work in this sense of collective impact. I hope you were able to learn something new today. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. I'm also going to leave our website and my LinkedIn profile here in the chat, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or if you'd like to learn more about the initiative. And also, once again, thank you so much, Annette, Gentiana, and ESDEurope for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danilo. It was very interesting to hear and learn more about the platform. It's a very important step that you've taken, and I'm very happy we are in contact, and the way we connected was via LinkedIn. So just for you to know that sometimes LinkedIn does work. And from what you were mentioning, so for instance, I am a mother who joined martial arts because my kids joined martial arts first. And that is how I started the journey that later took me to empowerment self-defense. And many of our ESD instructors that are part of our network had somehow started to do their own ESD form without really knowing that there is a consolidated, decades-old methodology, which we call empowerment self-defense. And the beauty of ESD is because it goes to the core of gender-based violence and other forms of violence and makes it adaptable, usable in any corner of the world. So one of my questions, it is how do you exchange experiences within your platform? Like, how do you share experiences for members to learn from each other and share different tools that are, in this case, for empowerment? And my second question is that during my experience practicing martial arts, there were very different profiles of senseis or senpais or those who would be teaching a class or a seminar or a session. And in some cases, those spaces were not that safe. They were not safe because of certain comments, including sexist comments, misogynistic comments, etc. So that's my second question. How do you deal with these kind of situations? Like, do you raise awareness? Do you organize specific sessions that can tackle these kind of issues and so on?
Thank you very much for the questions. So I will go in order. So just to contextualize, we first had this idea back in 2019. We had developed a pilot project in Angola, in Luanda, Angola, and then it was also our community Taekwondo project called Kicking for Nature. So that was the first time we actually started to develop connections outside of Brazil. And then we start to strengthen those connections in Africa. And then it was always about these guys owning dojos and gyms in Angola, in Mozambique, reaching out to us and just asking, how do we develop our programs in the way that you do? We had nearly 2 decades of experience at the time. So that's how we started to think, how can we create a way for us to really exchange these experiences? And then that's when the idea for us to develop a platform for the exchange of experiences started to develop. But then we had the pandemic and a lot had changed at the time. And then we resumed the idea back in 2022. So as a nonprofit, and we are a nonprofit and the coalition is part of our nonprofit, everything takes a little bit more time. So we launched the initiative back in 2025 during the United Nations Youth Forum. And the idea initially, and it is what we are currently developing, is a platform so that organizations can, sort of have the opportunity to just type in and chat with others in a way that is simpler, and also leveraging artificial intelligence so that no one is left out. Because what we do have now is, I would say, about 15% of the organizations they do not speak English. So organizations in Africa, Latin America, they struggle a little bit, and we also struggle with them because we want to support them and have them as part of the group as a whole. So right now, what we do, we host these sessions, these online sessions, because we are all in very different contexts and time zones. So we have to think about how we can engage them. So pretty much hosting sessions in morning time in Brazil and in afternoon time in Brazil so that we can have everybody involved. We are currently on the process of developing an online platform that can facilitate this integration of members. And we currently have 120, and we want all of them to be engaged. Now, you mentioned your second question about the classes for women. So this was really tricky at
Not only women,
when we
it's
started.
like the same mixed gender class where also women are participating, you know?
So we currently have two programs where we support the community. So one of them is Fight for Women. So it's only for the girls and women. And then we have Kicking for Nature, which we do our best to have a 50-50 participation.
Etc. I'm talking like normal martial arts class, women participating, girls participating, and that setting I was referring to, please. Thank you.
Oh, I see. Thank you. So yeah, it's funny because I was not directly involved in, let's say, normal martial art classes like in a gym. It's always been through the social program that we developed here. I was actually a student in this same social project, and now I'm a coach. So it has always been around the social program that we develop here in the organization. So yeah, it's something that, as you said, we have guidelines, we have safeguarding procedures, and we have a whole full team of people involved in the project and not just the instructor, so that we can maintain a safe space for the girls and for the women participating in the project. And as you mentioned, sort of maybe combining what we are doing. Yeah, definitely, I would love to discuss this further. I would need to reach out to my team, but certainly let's keep in touch and let's think about this, because the coalition is all about this, partnering and exchanging experiences. And you have a wonderful network. There is definitely potential for collaboration.
It seems like what you are doing something very similar to what we're doing, which is very interesting. And I was thinking of if you had any ideas of, after hearing this webinar, the people here, if you have any idea how we can combine our work together. And the second one was, how do you actually, what is actually the role of your organization? So how do you reach out to people? How do you help? How does it work?
So this is really, really interesting, because when we launched the Martial Arts Coalition, we had like 7 organizations at the time. And then one organization started to give visibility, and then we had other organizations joining, and then it started kind of like a snowball. But we also have, we are always on the reach out to organizations that are doing similar social work using martial arts for social development and similar themes. And we know that there is a world of organizations and projects doing wonderful work. And it's hard for us to find all of these people, but we did find amazing people, amazing organizations, amazing projects that are so connected to what is behind the coalition. So I'm very happy to say we are now 122 organizations, and that is after a year of launching the project. And thankfully, the nonprofit that runs the project, the association, we are funded, so we are able to keep the project alive and develop the project even further. And it's a challenge as well, because every week there is 1 or 2 new organizations submitting their proposal to join us. So we are very happy with how it's developing, but it's also a challenge for us to kind of integrate everyone. But we're having more people join the team as well to work with us. But again, it's also a challenge because all of it is volunteer work. The people that work with us, it's volunteer work. So it's a challenge, but it's developing really well.
Nice. Thank you so much, Danilo. I'd like to give the floor to Sunny for a question, and then I will go through those that are in the chat. So Sunny, you go first, please.
Mute, please, Sunny.
Try. Okay, good. Danilo, I think your organization sounds wonderful. And I'm very impressed. And I would love for my school to join. And actually, I was filling out the application as you were talking, but I realized I am not a dictator. I have a board of directors and I have to talk to them first. But the idea of using martial arts as a vehicle for change, I think is great. And especially because martial arts reaches so many young men. And what I said before is I don't like the idea of men teaching empowerment, self-defense, but I love the idea of men teaching men and learning about reducing violence against women and girls. So congratulations on your work. I think it's great, and I will be very happy when we become a member of your group.
Thank you. We look forward to receiving the application from your organization.
Thank you. So Daniela is asking, where does the funding comes from? Like, are you funded? Although you just mentioned the volunteer work.
So we do have, as I said, we have the funding for the nonprofit, and it allows us to keep the projects running, but the funding is not specifically, it doesn't go to the coalition, but it goes to our community project, Kicking for Nature and Fight for Women. So we are able to keep the projects running. But even so, this is something that I always like to emphasize because for nearly 2 decades, we had very small funding and funding that came only from local organizations around the community that we work. So local businesses and individuals that believe in what we do. So small funding came for nearly 2 decades. And then we started to get funding from other overseas organizations and foundations. So it allows us to keep the project running and also focus on the Martial Arts Coalition, and perhaps in the near future, fund the coalition to better support the member organizations that are part of it.
Thank you. The other question is from Ira, asking what does it mean to actually join the coalition?
A good question. So the main thing I would say, it is actually what most organizations tell us after they join, is that they are now part of something bigger. They are part of a network, and they are able to exchange experiences with other similar organizations. So for instance, as I was saying, we have very few organizations within the martial arts sector, within the coalition, that work with martial arts for nature education. Yeah, so we locally in Rio de Janeiro, we do that. There is one small organization in Kenya that does that. There is another in Zimbabwe. There is another in the Philippines. So once they joined, it was like, hey, I'm not alone doing this. And this is just one example, but we have organizations, as you could see, working with self-defense for young girls. We have organizations that are focused solely on refugee integration. So being part of the network also means being part of, having these peers where you can learn from, because there are people and organizations that have been around for over 10 years, over 20 years. And then there are new organizations who were launched just last year, and they are really eager to learn something from other people who are just kind of walking in the same journey, walking in the same path. So it's an opportunity to learn from others and to be part of something bigger. But of course, the coalition is still quite new. It's been a year since we launched it, and there is a lot that we want to do, especially to offer to the member organizations. And we do not charge anything. Membership is completely free of charge. So our objective is to really strengthen the work that these organizations is doing. So yeah, maybe that's a good answer.
Thank you. And just to complement a little bit more, the question is, like, what steps do you take, or what activities do you organize in the framework of the platform? And that, for instance, is it webinars? Is it newsletter? Do you use WhatsApp groups? How do you communicate internally as a platform and externally with others who are not part of it?
Yeah, so we do have the newsletter. That is the main way for us to contact organizations. As I said, we are currently in the middle of the development of the online platform. So that's going to be the main space for us to really collaborate and exchange experiences. But we do have like a big community both on LinkedIn and also on Instagram. So that's really where the members get to know each other, and we post about the members. We give them visibility through the platforms. But yeah, because we are a not-for-profit initiative and not funded at the moment, there is only so much that we can do. But we are developing this platform, and hopefully by the end of the year, it's going to be ready, and it's going to be the platform for members to really engage and learn from others.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Danilo.
You were saying that You have limited funding. What is your plan for sustainability? Because most of the time when someone gives you a grant, the goal for them is that you will be sustainable outside of their grant. And so if people are wanting to join, for me, when I want to join an organization, I want to know that it's going to have longevity. And so I hear that you're creating a platform for members. Are they going to be sustaining you? Are you going to be making products and services? What is the sustainability model for your organization so that it lasts?
That's actually a good question. The whole idea was to never charge anything to join the coalition or to participate in activities. It's not a business per se. And then, of course, it's a challenge for us to also make it sustainable, make it last long. What I do say is that the organization that is developing it, that let's say owns the coalition, which is the Jadir Association in Rio de Janeiro, we are thankfully funded, and through this funding, we're able to keep things running. But yeah, we are very hopeful actually, because this is quite a unique project, and I can't say much, but we are in the talks with some potential funders, and hopefully with good news very soon. But yeah, maybe that was your question. Maybe it's not about being a business. We don't want to charge anything, especially because about 80%, more than 80% of the members, they are small NGOs. So we, as an NGO ourselves, we know the struggles, we know the challenges, and we don't want to charge anything from them, but actually give them support however we can. But it's mostly through an exchange of experiences, an exchange of insights, and learning from each other. I think that is what's most important in this initiative.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning for a business. I ran a nonprofit, and the only way for the nonprofit to run is for it to be sustainable. I ended up getting a great Gates grant. So part of that is like, yes, there's big funders that will be there for you, but you have to have something outside of that in order for it to actually sustain and survive. So that was what I meant by it. But it sounds amazing. It's really cool, all of the work that you're doing. And it's exciting to see the images of just these different models, because it reminds me so much of the ESD world, where we all have our different martial arts styles and we're integrating them in and we're trying out different things. So thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to thank you very much, Danilo, for bringing this new information to all the participants. In Albania, I wanted to add another example from Europe. We have the project Empowerment Self-Defense in Schools, and it has been approved as an extracurricular activity in about 80 public schools here in Albania. So what we've been doing is we've been training the teachers from the public schools, and then they are the ones who teach ESD to the students in their respective schools. And it's similar to the Nari Shakti, I think it was, from India. And it's the same approach. We work with boys and girls. We work with the community, put a lot of attention, not only to set boundaries, for instance, but also how to respect boundaries or the mechanisms for support and so on. So that's why I was very interested to look at the exchange of information with organizations that are interested or that develop similar type of work. So very grateful for your participation. It has been very inspiring and motivating. Some of the participants also wrote some words in the chat. You can read them. So thank you, and hopefully we'll continue to be in touch. We'll continue to be supporting each other in different ways. We know funding is a challenge for all NGOs, especially nowadays. And we also know how much is needed to be coordinated and to strengthen our network wherever we are. And looking forward to continue that and to be able to build this unique work that we're doing.